be live with everyone.
Happy to be a guinea pig.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Anaesthesia Coffee Break. I'm Lahiro.
And I'm Stan.
And today we've got a live Viva episode with Luke Fletcher, or Fletch as he's known to his mates. How you going? How you going, Luke? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here. So my name's Luke Fletcher, and I'm a trainee in the Northwest Training Scheme. I'm currently at the Northern Hospital, and I'm just rotated from the Austin Hospital. I'm about 2 weeks past my written, so that's been nice, and now just starting to warm up for Vivas, and it's a pleasure to be here today, although feeling very rusty. So
well, it's like the eye before the rest of the storm, really, the car of the storm, and then boom, it happens again.
Something to look forward to.
Right.
And how did you feel about the written?
Yeah, not too bad. You go through those predictable cycles of, come out of the exam thinking, yeah, not too bad. You get to the car and you realize everything you could have written.
Yes.
You mull over that for a couple of days, but hopefully none of it was, significant enough that it will be a major problem, and hopefully I'll be invited to a Viva, but time will tell. So in the meantime, crack on.
And that's a very common theme that you've described, not only for what you said, but for other trainees who I've also talked to as well, and in fact for myself as well. When I remember coming up from the written and just going, oh, I wish I'd answered that call-out question a lot better, and I wish I structure it, and I missed out on a couple of points. And you sort of reminisce on it, and I think at the end of the day, you gotta close that chapter, and now it's on to the Vivas, and it's full steam ahead for the next 7 weeks.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, that's a long time. But also, Luke, I mean, it's really great of you to come on because it's obviously pretty confronting being recorded while you're doing a Viva. I think not many people would be game enough to do that, and I know we've done so much Viva stuff, part 2 and part 1 over the last couple of years. And the amount of feedback we get, like people really appreciate it, that they can actually hear what it's like and, play along really. So thanks very much for coming on board.
Yeah. Happy to, this is one way of motivating myself to study, I feel. So no, it's mutually beneficial. So thank you.
Right, good. All right. So I'll start first.
And I will keep time. So we'll do, 4 questions, 5 minutes per question, just like the actual exam. Yeah. And we'll give a bit of feedback at the very end, I believe.
All right.
Let's get started.
So what kind of drug is Suxamethonium?
Suxamethonium is a depolarizing neuromuscular blocking agent.
And how does it work?
It works as an agonist on the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor. It's shaped like 2 acetylcholine molecules and binds to both alpha subunits of the nicotinic choline receptor. This causes depolarization of the postsynaptic membrane and leads to paralysis.
And so when you see the fasciculations, how does that occur?
Yep. So following depolarization, it leads to excitation, contraction, coupling of the muscles, and that leads to the fasciculation phenomena that we see. And after that fasciculation has occurred, there's subsequent deactivation of voltage-gated sodium channels, and those nicotinic acetylcholine receptors are also blocked, preventing further depolarization, and then that leads to paralysis.
And how is that fasciculation different from a sustained contraction? Like, why isn't there a sustained contraction like tetany?
So tetany occurs due to repeated depolarization and summation of action potentials. With the activity of Suxamethonium, you do get initial depolarization, but then the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor is unable to be reactivated by acetylcholine because it's blocked by the effect of Suxamethonium, and therefore you don't get the summation of excitatory postsynaptic potentials, and therefore you don't get sustained contraction.
And how does the offset of Suxamethonium occur?
Suxamethonium offset is through diffusion away from the neuromuscular junction into the plasma, where it is hydrolyzed by plasma cholinesterases. It cannot be broken down in the neuromuscular junction, by acetylcholinesterase as acetylcholine can, and so it must diffuse away.
And what are the side effects of suxamethonium?
There are lots of side effects. The major ones would include anaphylaxis, suxamethonium apnea, and malignant hypothermia. Important side effects would also include hypokalemia, bradycardias, and tachyarrhythmias, and muscle aches. Other side effects might include increased oxygen consumption, increased gastric, intragastric pressure, potentially increased intracranial and intraocular pressures, myalgias, fasciculations, as we've already discussed, and yeah.
And you said hyperkalemia. What's the mechanism of action?
So following suxamethonium binding to the nicotinic choline, acetylcholine receptors, there's diffusion of ions down their concentration gradients. This allows potassium to leave from muscle out through the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, and this results in a release of potassium into the interstitial and therefore extracellular fluid, and this can increase potassium plasma concentrations by about 0.5 millimoles per litre in normal patients.
Okay, and which patients are more susceptible to an increase in potassium?
A couple of main categories: patients with neuromuscular disorders and degenerative conditions like with upper motor neuron lesions and strokes. It can also include Burns patients who have upregulation of immature nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, and patients with critical illness myopathy would be the main patients.
What are the ECG changes you'd expect with hyperkalemia?
Yep, so you can get repolarization abnormalities in the form of peaked T waves. You can also get atrial conduction disorders in the form of atrial fibrillation. And you can get AV nodal conduction delays and blockade, which can lead to bradycardias, second and third degree heart blocks, and eventually ventricular abnormalities, which leads to a sine wave appearance, eventually asystolic cardiac arrest.
And do you know why you get peak T waves?
So due to the repolarization, there's more difficulty in the potassium leaving the cell because of the higher extracellular potassium, and that leads to peak T waves. Okay.
Now, what are the factors that affect delivery of oxygen to tissues?
Those are governed by the oxygen flux equation, or the DO2 equation. DO2 is equal to cardiac output, which is normally 5 litres per minute, times the content of oxygen in blood. In arterial blood, this is CaO2, and this is normally about 200 mils per minute, 200 mils per litre. So DO2 would be equal to 1,000 mils per minute. The factors affecting CaO2 would be hemoglobin, oxygen saturation, and PaO2 as well. The equation is CaO2 equals hemoglobin times saturation times Huffner's constant, which is 1.34, plus 0.03 times PaO2, which gives mils per litre.
Now, you mentioned Huffner's constant of 1.34. What does that mean to you?
Yep, so it's a conversion constant that takes the amount of oxygen that a fully saturated gram of hemoglobin can carry in mils. And so it's normally, that means that 1 gram of hemoglobin that is fully saturated with oxygen can carry 1.34 mils of oxygen.
And why do you see, sometimes you see 1.39? Why is that?
Yep, so 1.39 is considered to be the true value for adult hemoglobin. But in normal patients, there's a couple of other types of hemoglobins, including HbA2, HbF, and other hemoglobin species, and that dilutes the carrying capacity of all the hemoglobins. And so on average, between all the hemoglobin species, the carrying capacity is 1.34.
And what are some of the ways that you can think about in terms of increasing oxygen delivery?
Yep. So following the equation, you can increase cardiac output, and that can be done through increasing preload in the form of volume or venoconstriction, increasing contractility with inotropic support, increasing heart rate by increasing chronotropy, or also decreasing afterload through vasodilation peripherally. You can also increase the hemoglobin through transfusion. You can increase saturations by increasing the amount of oxygen administered to the patient to increase their saturation. You can also increase the amount of dissolved oxygen by increasing the FiO2 further, although this has minimal additional effects.
Now, if a patient was in a hyperbaric chamber, how much would that appreciably increase your oxygen delivery?
So I think that it depends on that barometric pressure, but you can increase, I think, the oxygen carrying capacity. So the amount of dissolved oxygen, I think you can add at FiO2 of about 100 is about 20 mils per litre at normal atmospheric pressure. So if you increase the atmospheric pressure to say double, then that's 40 mils, or triple, that's 60 mils.
And when you say 20 mils, as in 20 mils for every how many mils of blood?
Per litre of blood.
Okay. Now, when we think about drugs that we can give, how does atropine affect cardiac output?
Yep. So atropine is a muscarinic receptor antagonist. It blocks vagal tone and increases heart rate. Increasing heart rate will increase cardiac output, because cardiac output is equal to stroke volume times heart rate, and therefore increase oxygen delivery.
And if sometimes you see that despite using atropine, you see that the cardiac output doesn't increase despite the increase in heart rate, what would be the reason for that?
Sometimes increasing the heart rate can result in a decrease in stroke volume. And so if the overall, if there's no, that might mean that there's an overall reduction in cardiac output. And this might happen in the situation of obstructive cardiac lesions where stroke volume is fixed, like aortic stenosis. And
what's your definition of shock?
Shock is a state of impaired oxygen consumption and delivery is inadequate to meet tissue demands.
Okay.
Excellent. To your next question. What are the antihypertensives you can use intraoperatively?
There are many classes. So you can use anesthetic agents, including IV induction agents and inhalational agents. You can also use opioids. Other agents would include alpha-1 antagonists, alpha-2 agonists, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, GTN or sodium nitroprusside nitrate containing solutions. Other agents like hydralazine can also be used, and diuretics potentially possible.
Have you ever used a diuretic intraoperatively?
Once or twice, but not for the use of management of hypertension.
What is sodium nitroprusside?
So sodium nitroprusside is an inorganic compound that acts as an arterial and venous vasodilator.
How does it work?
It works by reacting with hemoglobin to produce nitric oxide, and that acts on vascular smooth muscle and causes arterial and venous vasodilation. The nitric oxide diffuses into the smooth muscle and increases guanylate cyclase, which increases cyclic GMP, which increases protein kinase G activity. And then there's an increase in myosin light chain phosphatase and a decrease in myosin light chain kinase, which leads to vascular smooth muscle relaxation and vasodilation. That leads to a decrease in systemic vascular resistance and also in venous tone and therefore venous return, and therefore can contribute to reducing mean arterial pressure.
And if you were to give it, how would you give it?
So it's given intravenously. It's usually given via a central line. It comes as a red powder and is reconstituted into an orange sort of solution. It needs to be protected from light because it degrades. And when it's infused in a rate of about 1 to 10 mics per minute.
You sure about that?
No, it might be mics per kilo per minute.
Okay, and how would you make it up if you've got a 50 milligram vial?
So I'd reconstitute it in dextrose, 5%. It's usually reconstituted to about 50 to 200 mics per mil.
Okay. What are the other effects on the body?
Yep. So in addition to a reduction in systemic vascular resistance and therefore a reduction in mean arterial pressure, it can also reduce or increase cardiac output depending on whether it's differential effects of reduction in preload and afterload, which one is greater. So the reduction in preload is greater, it will reduce cardiac output. It can also decrease coronary vascular resistance and it would reduce myocardial oxygen demand, so it can improve ischemia. It will also act in the lungs and impair hypoxic pulmonary vasoconstriction and increases shunt and therefore can lead to hypoxemia and hypoxia. It can also impair cerebral autoregulation and therefore can increase cerebral blood flow and can increase intracranial pressure. It also can lead to methemoglobinemia through the donation of nitric oxide species, and tachyphylaxis can also ensue.
Tell me about the metabolism.
So sodium nitroprusside is first taken up into blood cells where it reacts with oxyhemoglobin, turning that oxyhemoglobin to methemoglobin, and then from there it releases one nitric oxide molecule which reacts with the smooth muscle as already discussed. It also donates 5 cyanide ions, which must be handled by the body, otherwise cyanide toxicity develops. These cyanide ions can react with methemoglobin to form cyano-methemoglobin. They can also be combined with sulfhydryl groups, forming thiocyanate, which is less toxic. And it can also combine with vitamin B12 to form an inorganic complex. Most of it is eliminated through thiosulfates.
What can you give for management of this toxicity?
Of cyanide toxicity?
Yep.
So firstly, you would reduce the amount of sodium nitroprusside that you're giving and potentially switch to a different agent. You could maintain airway, breathing, circulation, and support the management of the patient, including preventing acidosis and maintaining oxygenation.
How about direct antidotes or direct treatment?
Yep. So direct things would include administering sulfhydryl groups in the form of, I think, something like maybe NAC or a sulfur group donation. You can also give vitamin B12. And you can also give nitrite containing products like GTN, which increase methemoglobin formation.
Okay.
And methemoglobin can combine with the cyanide.
Next question. What are the functions of the liver?
The function of the liver can be broken down into protective and regulatory. The protective functions of the liver include the immune response, and that is there's an innate response where it filters the blood. It also contains Kupffer cells, which have macrophage and macrocytic properties, and also interact with the adaptive immune system to present antigens to the body. There's also detoxification and metabolic functions where it metabolizes drugs and toxins through phase 1, phase 2 reactions. The other functions of the liver are regulatory, and they include metabolic in the processing of glucose, proteins, fats, and other energy substrates, storage of blood, minerals, vitamins, and glycogen.
How much blood is stored in the liver?
About 350 to 500 mils.
You mentioned metabolism of drugs. Tell me about that.
Yep. Drugs and toxins can be metabolized by the liver as part of phase 1 or phase 2 reactions. Phase 1 generally includes oxidation, reduction, or hydrolysis. And phase 2 reactions involves glucuronidation, acetylation, methylation, and sulfuration.
Sulfation, yeah.
Sulfation, thank you.
Tell me about that. So, what enzyme system is required for phase 1?
So common enzyme systems would include the CYP450 family of enzymes, but other enzyme systems can be involved, like alcohol dehydrogenase, esters, esterases, etc.
Are substances usually active or inactive after phase 1?
Phase 1 reactions may be active, but they're usually more, they can be made more water soluble after phase 1 reactions.
Okay, what affects the clearance by the liver? What are the factors affecting clearance by the liver?
So I guess it would depend on its ability to perform phase 1, phase 2 reactions on these drugs. So generally, the more lipid soluble, the more lipid soluble, the more likely it is.
Anything else?
Uncharged, more unionized.
What is clearance?
Clearance is the volume of plasma that is completely removed of a drug or substance per unit time.
Any other factors affecting it besides the drug itself?
So the clearance of a drug, say through the liver, will also be affected by liver blood flow.
Tell me about liver blood flow.
So liver blood flow is about 1,400 mils per minute, or about 100 mils per minute per 100 grams of liver tissue. The liver arterial or liver blood supply is through the hepatic artery, which contributes about 25% of total blood flow, and the hepatic portal vein, which contributes 75% of blood flow.
And how much oxygenation?
So the oxygen delivery to the liver is split 50-50 between the hepatic artery and the portal vein.
How is it regulated?
So the regulation through the hepatic artery, there's metabolic regulation. Increased demand will result in vasodilation, increased delivery. The hepatic artery also has myogenic autoregulation. So as blood pressure drops, then the hepatic artery can dilate, but only up to a MAP of 80, and below that it's maximally dilated. It also demonstrates something called hepatic arterial buffering response. So that means that as the portal venous flow goes down, the hepatic artery is able to vasodilate and compensate for reduction in hepatic portal venous flow. This is a semi-reciprocal relationship, and so a decrease in hepatic arterial blood flow cannot be compensated by dilation of the portal vein. The portal vein itself doesn't have much.
Substance? What substance is that due to?
It's adenosine.
Excellent. That's the end of the viva.
Well done.
Well done.
Thank you.
How do you feel?
Oh man,
you did so well. That was just such a great viva. Great viva.
Thank you. I felt a bit rusty on some of them, and sort of felt like I got
a lot of people
stuck on.
Yeah, a lot of people listening out there are going to be intimidated. Oh dear.
There's no doubt you've got a very good viva style, and I think you've got that innate sort of confidence. Where despite sort of questions you may not have heard before, you're able to sort of fall back on, your knowledge and present yourself very confidently. And it really does come across during the viva. And, the answers may not be perfect, and we don't expect it to be perfect now, but they come across so confidently that even the examiner sometimes, even myself, I go, well, maybe that is right.
The other thing I want to say is just that I hope anyone listening to this is able to record themselves and just compare certain aspects. I know that when I examine people, part 1, part 2, some people take a long time to get to the answer to the question, but you answer it so directly and quickly that I can move on. Like I've literally timed some answers, and it takes about 20 seconds to get to the actual answer after a long preamble, which is very medical. You know, when you hear a presentation, you know, people talk about the background and this and that, and finally they get to the meat of the topic that everyone's here for. And these exams, I believe, want you to get to the point straight away, whether it's your first part or your second part. And, you know, just from the start, you were doing that exactly the way I would encourage it to be done. And from everything I know of examiners, I don't think they would disagree. They want you to move on. They want you to get to the point, and they want you to, you know, quickly move on to the next question so that they can pass you.
Yep. No, I mean, look, with the Suxamethonium question, you know, very well done, and you answered everything confidently. The only one I want to sort of point out is the peak T wave mechanism. I think you described it as because of the high potassium extracellularly, you need a higher repolarization. Was that?
That's what I said, and then I started to say it and realized that it probably wasn't right. But also, for those of you not listening at home, I did see a timer that said, you're about to finish this question and move on to the next question. I was kind of hoping that it would just leave it there. I'd be happy to hear a better explanation than mine though, Stan. I know this is one that's confused my study group. So
No, that's all right. So as you know, with hyperkalemia, your resting membrane potential becomes less negative. And so what actually happens is your action potential duration shortens with hyperkalemia. And when it shortens throughout the ventricle, you actually get more synchronous repolarization. So because a lot more ventricular myocytes are being repolarized at the same time, that's why you get those peak T waves. So it's not because of a stronger repolarization needed because of hyperkalemia. It's because of more myocardial cells being synchronous and being repolarized at the same time because of that shorter action potential duration. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you for that.
And then with the oxygen delivery, like that was very, very strong. And the only thing I would point out is make sure that when you talk about the oxygen flux equation, know in your head that there are, you either talking about it in terms of deciliters or liters. And so either one's correct, but I think it is important to make sure that you make the distinction, because when you talk about 0.03, which is the absorbance of, the dissolved oxygen in blood, 0.03 is for liters, whereas if you go 0.003, it's for deciliters. And certainly with hyperbaric conditions, when you use deciliters, it's less impressive. In other words, at 1 atmosphere, you probably have about 2 mils of dissolved oxygen, whereas at 2 atmospheres in hyperbaric conditions, it only goes up to about, it doubles, it goes up to 4 mils. So it only increases your oxygen delivery by about 10% in hyperbaric conditions. But it came across very strong, very confident. I mean, this is just the start. So, you've got, imagine making yourself at the end. I'd be amazed. In fact, we should swap seats.
I think I'd enjoy that actually.
We'll get Luke on the podcast examining.
Right.
That's good.
Mark, did you have any feedback at all?
No, again, I thought it was very strong. You quickly went through a range, what antihypertensives can use in trop, great. Just give it a whole range of stuff that you would use. I remember saying diuretics as well for this question when I was asked, and they said, would you ever give that? I'm like, no, but I want to give a complete answer, whatever. Anyway, how does it work? Again, very strong. You went to a lot of detail in there. And again, quickly, it wasn't like you took up time. The dose, 10 mics per kilo per minute is probably on the upper, beyond the upper end. So, 0.5 to 6, you'd probably never give more than 4 in ICU settings, and maybe not even greater than 1.5 mics per kilo per minute. And when I asked you, are you sure? You corrected yourself in a very reasonable way. You knew how to make it up roughly. I think most of these things, practically speaking, GTN is 30 milligrams in a 50 mil solution. This is the same. I'd do 30 in 50. So mils per hour is X times 10 mics per minute. Makes it easy to formulate. Otherwise, really strong with the effects, and even all the individual effects of each of the organ beds, which are fantastic. And I just wanted to, this is obviously a long viva that I've just kind of created, but to get you to the point of what is the management. You went through decent thorough management, and then you were getting out the points of sodium thiosulfates and using nitrates. You're trying to mop up, trying to convert to sodium thiocyanate. As well as methemoglobin, as well as the cyanocobalamin with additional B12 that can use prophylactically or in a subacute setting. So again, very, very good with both. Yeah, very good with that. And then the liver, again, I just want to give you some stuff that maybe you haven't studied that much of, because it's a bit of an outside topic to the respiratory, cardiac, etc. But again, yeah, you're really strong with that. Like, you had good formats, good frameworks for answering overall what the functions of the liver, and we then moved that down through metabolism into clearance. What are the effects of it? To broadly speaking, hepatic blood flow, plasma protein binding, and then drug and hepatic enzyme activity that you mentioned. And then once you say hepatic blood flow, you move into that. And again, you knew some decent detail. Also, you knew how to describe this semi-reciprocal relationship, which was fantastic. And the fact that it only affects the hepatic artery, not the portal vein itself, and that adenosine buildup is probably the cause of it as well. So fantastic answer. And you moved through quite a lot in a short period of time.
Thank you. That's really good feedback, and good to know that hopefully I'm on track.
Yeah, that's right. Don't get too bored with it. Just keep plugging away at the basics as well as getting to the interesting stuff. And hopefully, if you remember these vivas, give these vivas to your mates just for paying it forward type thing. And yeah, I think that's good. Did you have any questions, Luke?
No, it was really good. And it was really good to do it as a full viva. I haven't done too many of those. So it's a good opportunity to go through it at the pace that you would go through it on the day, which I think is really good. So thank you very much for you guys. And, I really enjoy listening to you in the car in the morning, and now I get to speak to you in the afternoon, and it's just it's a win-win.
So cool. Yeah.
You get to hear yourself in the car in a couple of weeks' time.
I might skip that episode.
This is going out for everyone to listen to Luke. The voice of Luke. Anyway, so let's wrap it up, but definitely put in a plug that, again, if you'd like to be vivid live, or at least recorded, on our show, please write into us at lahirandstan@gmail.com. We'll even give you the stems if you'd like, just so that you can prepare a little bit. So, it's just extra practice to you guys and really helpful for everyone else. And again, we've got the Patreon set up. So if you want to support us, and then obviously all of that does go to fund a fella so we can help countries in need. That's where all of that will go. So please look at the link below. And otherwise, just share with anyone who might be interested. And thanks everyone for your time. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Luke.
Thank
you very much, La. Thanks, Dan.
Great work.